The conference room hung heavy with secrets. Outside, storm clouds churned above the skyline, turning the floor-to-ceiling windows into mirrors that reflected lies back at the men who told them. Inside, tension wrapped around expensive suits and rehearsed handshakes. Victor Chen occupied the head seat, spine straight, charcoal suit tailored with surgical precision. His jet-black hair gleamed under recessed lighting as his dark eyes traveled the room, dissecting every mouth movement with the sharp focus of someone who'd learned survival meant watching what others missed. The executives facing him wore practiced smiles. Their heads bobbed in agreement. Their lips formed carefully selected words of partnership and profit. Beside Victor sat Daniel, his trusted interpreter of 9 years, hands flowing through sign language with the polish of long practice. Everything appeared normal. Everything felt secure. Yet one executive drummed his knuckles against polished oak in an irregular pattern. Another straightened his tie 3 times in 2 minutes. Tiny tells, perhaps meaningless, perhaps not. Near the corner, a server refilled coffee cups with trembling hands. Maya kept her gaze lowered, her crisp white blouse and black apron rendering her invisible among men who traded in power. She wasn't meant to notice. She wasn't meant to comprehend. But when Daniel signed, "They're proposing equal partnership," her eyes darted to the executive's mouth. Those weren't the words he'd spoken. Not remotely close. Her chest tightened. She understood ASL. Had mastered it during her younger sister's short life, back when signing goodnight across a pediatric ward felt like the only control she possessed. Now, years removed, standing in a room where one signature could destroy a man's legacy, she witnessed deception being served to Victor Chen like hemlock in crystal. The pen rested in his grip. The documents sat within reach, and nobody present expected him to walk out alive. Maya's fingers shook as she lifted the carafe. One step closer, then another. Her heartbeat thundered in her skull, and as she leaned forward to top off a cup near Victor, she allowed the sugar spoon to tumble from her pocket. It struck the floor with deliberate percussion. She crouched low, and her hands flew into desperate motion. Deception. These documents mean destruction. For one suspended moment, the world continued rotating. Daniel kept signing. The executives maintained their masks. But Victor Chen's eyes, those calculating, dangerous eyes, found hers, and within the absolute silence of his existence, he discovered what nobody imagined he could access: reality. The pen froze. His hand hovered above the papers, motionless, while electricity crackled through the atmosphere. An executive adjusted his position. Daniel's sign stuttered, confused, and Maya, still kneeling with a spoon clutched in her fist and her survival hanging by a thread, understood she'd just entered a battle with no exit. Welcome to Afroque Drama Stories. Before we continue, please take just a moment to like this video and subscribe to discover what Victor does next. Your support truly helps our channel flourish and enables us to share more compelling African narratives. Also, let us know where you're watching from. Share your country flag in the comments. Victor's hand remained suspended above the contract, knuckles bone-white with strain. The silence inside his mind held no novelty. It had shaped his existence for 36 years. But this silence carried different weight, suffocating, like the stillness preceding thunder. He touched 2 fingers to his forehead and shut his eyes. Daniel's hands immediately entered his sight line, interpreting what Victor presumed was worry from the opposite side. "Mr. Petrov wonders if you require a break. He says there's no pressure." Victor nodded with calculated deliberation. He signed back smoothly. "Migraine. 5 minutes." He rose, fastening his jacket with movements so measured they verged on ceremonial. The executives traded looks, quick, cautious, but Victor registered them anyway. He'd constructed an empire by interpreting what remained unspoken, by catching the microshifts that exposed intention. Right now, every instinct he'd sharpened across 2 decades in shadow economies screamed wrongness. Moving toward the windows, he studied their reflections in the glass. Petrov's lips curved into something between amusement and anticipation. Zhao relaxed into his chair, shoulders dropping like someone who'd just escaped danger. And Daniel glanced toward the executives wearing an expression Victor had never witnessed before. Relief. Not confusion, not concern. Pure relief. Victor's jaw clenched. He angled his head slightly, enough to catch the server in his periphery. She remained crouched, retrieving the spoon with quaking fingers, eyes deliberately avoiding his, but her hands, those eloquent, frantic hands, had communicated with absolute clarity. Deception. These documents mean destruction. He'd invested 9 years trusting Daniel as his voice, his ears, his bridge to a world that operated faster than lip reading could track. 9 years of what he'd believed was unwavering allegiance. Daniel had stood beside him through territorial conflicts, through negotiations balanced on razor edges, through midnight hours when Victor's empire trembled on collapse. He'd transcended interpreter. He'd become family, or Victor had convinced himself of that. Rain hammered the windows, each impact like percussion he couldn't detect but sensed in his skeleton. In the warped reflection, Victor Chen reached a decision that would either preserve his existence or terminate it. He pivoted toward the table and signed with composure that masked the fury igniting in his core. Not today. My legal advisors will examine these documents. We'll reconvene in 48 hours. Daniel's hands faltered for a fraction of a second, but Victor caught it. The seamless confidence cracked. Then the interpretation resumed, and across the table, Petrov's face hardened into something arctic and strategic before he forced it back behind a businessman's veneer. Naturally, Petrov said, his lips shaping words Victor could decipher clearly. We comprehend. 48 hours. Zhao's mouth shifted next, addressing Petrov in what appeared to be Mandarin. Victor grasped only fragments through lip reading, but context told him plenty. They were displeased. The careful orchestration of whatever ambush they'd prepared was disintegrating, and the alarm in their expressions communicated everything he required. This transcended a problematic agreement. This was assassination wrapped in legal documentation. Daniel signed something regarding rescheduling, regarding legal consultation, his hands moving with the practiced fluidity of someone who'd spent years perfecting duplicity. Victor observed those hands he'd relied upon to transmit his voice, his authority, his very existence into spaces where he couldn't detect incoming threats, and felt ice crystallize in his chest. Betrayal carried distinctive gravity. Victor had experienced it previously, but never from someone this proximate, never from someone who wielded this magnitude of influence over his reality. He gathered the unsigned papers, sliding them into his briefcase with meticulous care. He didn't acknowledge the server again, didn't betray recognition of her presence. But departing the conference room, surrounded by his protection detail, he signed one instruction to the man at his side. A message Daniel couldn't observe from his angle. Shadow the server. Maintain distance, don't engage. Simply observe. His head of security, Marcus, offered the faintest acknowledgement. He'd protected Victor for 17 years, long predating Daniel's arrival, and his devotion had been tested and validated in violence. If anyone warranted Victor's faith in this moment, it was him. The elevator descent stretched longer than normal. Daniel stood adjacent, hands clasped, expression neutral, performing the role of concerned aide with perfection. Victor contemplated how many occasions Daniel had occupied this precise position, converting lies, delivering partial truths, steering him toward catastrophe while projecting loyalty. How many agreements had been sabotaged? How many prospects had vanished because Daniel filtered them away? How many adversaries had materialized because Daniel transformed his words into something unrecognizable? The rage accumulating in Victor's chest burned quietly, lethally, the variety that didn't detonate. It strategized. Reaching the lobby, Victor signed to Daniel. Go home. I need solitude. Clear my thoughts. I'll contact you tomorrow. Daniel's hands responded. Are you certain? I can remain if necessary. Go home, Daniel. The signs permitted no negotiation. Daniel nodded, projecting what resembled authentic concern, and vanished into the rain-drenched evening. Victor waited precisely 4 minutes. Then he signed to Marcus. Location? Marcus extracted his phone, verifying the signal from the tracker his colleague had attached to the server's jacket when she'd exited through the back entrance. Intelligent woman. She'd chosen the rear passage, likely hoping to evade notice. Marcus's hands moved. Service corridor, proceeding toward the transit stop on 7th. Take me there immediately. The underground establishment stood nearly vacant when Maya completed her shift. Her hands continued trembling as she cleaned the counter for the fourth round, unable to cease replaying the instant she'd signed to a man capable of ordering her death with a gesture. What insanity had possessed her? That he'd express gratitude? That he'd trust some server above people he'd collaborated with for years? She'd committed a catastrophic error, potentially lethal. Her supervisor, Andre, had studied her strangely when she'd requested early departure. "Everything all right, Maya? You look like death." "Exhausted," she'd answered, manufacturing a smile that felt like shattered glass. Extended shift. He'd released her without resistance, probably because she never requested favors, never protested, never created problems. She represented reliability, covering extra hours when colleagues vanished, enduring harassment from patrons who mistook her uniform for availability. Now traversing the rain-soaked passage with her jacket pulled close, she questioned whether dependability was about to prove fatal. The downpour had intensified when she emerged through the service exit. Wet pavement and refuse assaulted her senses immediately, blending with vehicle exhaust from the street ahead. Her sneakers splashed through puddles mirroring neon advertisements of the city's margins. Pawnshops, all-night diners, establishments where people arrived after exhausting superior alternatives. She'd numbered among them for 4 years. Since the medical invoices commenced. Since her sister's deterioration outpaced physician predictions. Since she'd authorized treatments they couldn't finance because the alternative meant witnessing her suffer. Lily had been 6 at death. 6 years old. She'd dedicated her final 18 months battling what her body couldn't overcome. Yet she'd mastered ASL regardless. Demanded it because she'd claimed she wanted genuine communication with Maya. Not through doctors or nurses, or their father's inadequate interpretation. "I want to hear you through my hands," she'd signed once. "That way, you're perpetually near." Maya blinked precipitation from her vision. Or perhaps tears. Difficult to distinguish anymore. She managed precisely 9 steps before the black vehicle appeared beside her. The rear door opened. Maya's breath seized. Her initial impulse screamed run, but her legs had transformed to stone. A figure in dark attire emerged. Not one of the meeting executives, but someone radiating command and menace equally. Tall, powerfully built, features suggesting he'd witnessed nightmares most people only imagined. Then Victor Chen stepped out behind him. At proximity, he emanated greater threat than across any conference table. His eyes burned darker, sharper, fixing on her with intensity that felt like X-ray vision penetrating to her marrow. Rain streamed from his immaculate hair, his expensive suit absorbing water. Yet he registered neither discomfort nor awareness. He signed something. His movements flowed confidently, nothing resembling the rigid corporate signing she'd observed Daniel perform. This represented someone who'd inhabited ASL, who'd claimed it as primary language rather than utility. "Enter the vehicle." Not a request. Maya's voice emerged smaller than intended. "I can't. I shouldn't." His hands insisted. "You preserved my life tonight. Now I must preserve yours. Enter." Rain plastered her hair flat. Her uniform was saturated, the white fabric adhering to her skin in ways that intensified her vulnerability. Standing in that passage with water accumulating around her shoes, Maya recognized 2 options. Trust the man she'd warned, or wait for the people she'd warned him about to decide she represented loose ends requiring elimination. She entered the vehicle. The interior exuded leather and some costly fragrance she couldn't identify. Victor slid beside her while his security occupied the front passenger position. The driver departed the curb immediately, smooth and rehearsed as if retrieving terrified servers in storms represented routine Tuesday operations. For extended silence, neither moved. Maya pressed against the door, hyper-conscious of every respiration, every gesture. Climate control activated, warming her frozen digits, and she noted she was staining seats probably exceeding 6 months of her earnings. Then Victor's hands initiated movement, and despite everything, she discovered herself observing with the identical intensity she'd applied learning ASL years previous. "Your name," he signed. "Maya," she vocalized, then signed properly. "Maya." "How do you know sign language?" Her throat constricted. This represented the dreaded question because answering meant exposing a wound never fully healed. My sister. She was born deaf. I learned at 7 so we could communicate. She died 4 years ago. Victor's expression remained unchanged. Yet something shifted behind his eyes, something resembling recognition. Understanding loss in vocabulary transcending words or signs. I'm sorry, he signed. The manner his hands moved, measured, deliberate, weighted with authentic meaning, convinced her of his sincerity. Thank you, she whispered. What did they say? His hands demanded urgently. In the meeting, what did you hear that Daniel didn't communicate? Maya inhaled deeply. This represented the junction where she either committed completely to this madness or attempted retreat. But observing Victor Chen's face, the acute intelligence in his eyes and controlled fury in his jaw, she understood retreat had ceased being optional. They stated the merger would grant them majority control over your assets, she said, signing simultaneously. Once you signed, they'd possess legal authority to transfer liabilities and initiate prosecution. Mr. Petrov informed Mr. Zhao you'd face arrest within 24 hours of signing, that the agreement represented. She hesitated, then signed the phrase she'd heard. A beautifully wrapped cage. The muscle in Victor's jaw pulsed, sole indication of emotion he permitted. When he signed again, his movements sharpened, more controlled, as though physically restraining himself from violence. And Daniel, what did he communicate to me? They claim he told you they were proposing equal partnership, equivalent profit distribution, territorial expansion. Maya's hands moved with increasing confidence, settling into ASL's rhythm like homecoming. Everything they articulated contradicted what he signed. Every single statement was fabrication. The vehicle merged onto an expressway, city illumination blurring into color streaks against rain-streaked windows. Victor stared into the tempest seemingly forever. Maya studied his reflection, watched his expression cycle through emotions too rapid to catalog. Fury, betrayal, calculation, anguish. Then he rotated toward her, and this iteration contained something lethal in his expression, something reminding her precisely who occupied the adjacent seat. Do you know who I am? He signed. Yes, Maya said quietly. Everyone employed at the establishment knows. Then you comprehend I don't trust readily, and you comprehend what happens to people who violate that trust. Not a threat. A factual statement. Reminder that the man beside her had constructed an empire on fear and respect equally. I know, she said. So why warn me? The question ambushed her. Maya examined her hands. Identical hands that had learned speaking alternate vocabulary from love, that had served drinks to dangerous men, that had signed a warning she had no authority giving. Because, she said, signing as she spoke, my sister taught me that silence can function as imprisonment. And I watched you sitting there, trapped in deception someone else fed you. And I simply couldn't watch you walk into it. I couldn't watch someone imprisoned by silence when I possessed power to liberate them. Victor studied her extensively. His eyes searched her face as though attempting to decipher something written in forgotten vocabulary. Then his hands moved again, and this iteration contained something approximating respect in his signs. You risked your existence for a stranger. That qualified as either exceptionally courageous or exceptionally reckless. Probably both, Maya admitted. Now friends, if you're enjoying this story so far, hit the like button and subscribe to Soul Africa Stories. And don't forget to comment where you're tuning in from, your city or country. We love seeing our global family. For the first occasion since entering the vehicle, his mouth corner twitched. Not quite a smile, but proximate. A fracture in the armor he wore flawlessly. I require your assistance, he signed. For 48 hours. I need someone capable of hearing what's genuinely articulated. Someone Daniel doesn't know I can access. I'm merely a server, Maya said. I comprehend nothing about your world. I don't understand business or mergers or whatever game you're conducting. That's precisely why you're ideal. His signs turned definitive. Final. Daniel has filtered my reality for 9 years. I need truth. Complete truth. What people articulate when they assume I can't detect them. Conversations occurring in corridors and elevators. Telephone calls made when my back turns. And you're the sole person in this city I can trust delivering it. The vehicle decelerated, approaching a structure Maya didn't recognize. towering glass, the variety of location where people like her never penetrated the lobby without exceptional justification. Victor's hands moved again, and this iteration contains something resembling hope in his expression. I know about your debts. Medical bills from your sister. Educational loans. Rent 3 months delinquent. Maya's head snapped upward. How do you? I make knowing things my business. His sign stated facts. Assist me 48 hours. Become my eyes and ears. Communicate the truth everyone else conceals. When this concludes, every debt you carry vanishes. You restart. Clean slate. New existence. Whatever you desire. Maya's heart hammered her ribs. 48 hours. 2 days separating her from freedom from the weight crushing her since her sister's hospital invoices commenced arriving. 2 days from existence where she wouldn't work double shifts merely staying ahead of eviction. Where she wouldn't wake at 3 calculating which bill could tolerate late payment. But 2 days alongside a man whose enemies sought his elimination. 2 days in a world where people vanished for excessive knowledge. 2 days where one miscalculation might mean never reaching that clean slate. She observed Victor Chun, his penetrating eyes and immaculate suit and hands speaking vocabulary she'd learned from love. And she contemplated her sister, how she'd signed Be Brave the night preceding her death, how she'd spent her abbreviated life refusing to let her disability define her courage. 48 hours, she vocalized, then signed. Properly. I'll assist you. But afterward, I walk away. No obligations, no strings. I return to my life. You return to yours. Victor extended his hand. When she accepted it, his grip conveyed firmness, control, a promise made in vocabulary both understood. 48 hours, he signed. Then you're liberated. You possess my word. And somehow, observing his eyes, Maya believed him. Perhaps that rendered her naive. Perhaps desperate. But in that moment, clasping hands with a man capable of destroying her with a gesture, she chose believing that sometimes the most dangerous people were simultaneously the most honest. The driver opened the door, rain-soaked wind rushing into the vehicle. Maya stepped onto pavement probably exceeding her monthly salary, gazing upward at a structure representing a world she'd only served drinks to. Behind her, Victor emerged from the vehicle, already signing to his security detail. The large man nodded and advanced toward the entrance, scanning the street with practiced efficiency. Stay proximate to me, Victor signed to Maya. And remember, in my world, trust represents currency. You've just received more than most people earn across lifetimes. Don't make me regret it. I won't, she said, signing back with steady hands. And somewhere in her mind's recesses, she questioned whether 48 hours would suffice unraveling a conspiracy, or merely suffice getting them both killed. But she'd already crossed the threshold, already committed, already stepping into silence that communicated louder than any words possibly could. The penthouse radiated intentional silence, not emptiness. Victor's presence saturated every corner of the space, meticulously constructed for someone who experienced existence through vision and touch rather than sound. The floors gleamed polished concrete, absent rugs that might muffle vibrations Victor needed sensing through his feet. The walls featured floor-to-ceiling windows transforming the city into living artwork, every light and movement constituting information. Maya stood centerpoint in the main space, dripping rain onto floors probably exceeding her entire building's value. The space projected minimalism without coldness. Leather furniture in charcoal tones, a kitchen with clean geometry and professional-grade equipment. Wall art appearing museum-worthy. Everything occupied its designated position. Everything served purpose. Victor moved past her without ceremony, shedding his wet jacket across a chair. He signed to Marcus, who nodded and disappeared into another room. Then his complete attention rotated to Maya, and she felt his gaze's weight as physical sensation. You're shaking, he signed. I'm cold, Maya said. And wet. And perhaps somewhat terrified. Something possibly constituting amusement flickered across his face. He gestured toward a corridor. Second door left. Bathroom. Closet contains clothes. Take whatever fits. You can't function like this. Function, Maya echoed, the word feeling foreign. 12 hours previous, function had meant serving drinks and evading inappropriate touching. Now it meant something she couldn't yet define. She located the bathroom, all marble and chrome, with towels feeling cloud soft, and confronted herself in the mirror. Her uniform adhered like secondary skin, her hair plastered to her skull, her eyes appearing too wide, too frightened. She resembled exactly what she was. A woman who'd stumbled into something vastly exceeding her comprehension. The closet yielded clearly expensive yet understated clothes. She selected black trousers requiring ankle rolling, and a charcoal sweater, hanging loose on her frame. Emerging, Victor had transformed the dining table into Operations Central. Laptops, files, what appeared recording equipment, all distributed with military precision. Marcus had returned with a young woman Maya hadn't encountered. Small, efficient appearing, with sharp eyes assessing Maya in one glance. Victor's hands moved. This is Sophie. She manages my digital security. She doesn't sign but reads lips adequately. Sophie, this is Maya. She'll help us comprehend what we've been missing. Sophie nodded once, expression neutral yet not hostile. She spoke Korean that Maya couldn't follow, and Victor's response combined signing and simultaneous speech, a habit Maya recognized for people existing between two worlds. We commence with the recordings. Victor signed to Maya. I record every meeting, every business call. I read lips adequately for face-to-face conversations, but telephone calls, peripheral conversations, things articulated when people assume I'm not observing, those I miss. Daniel was supposed to review them, provide summaries. Now I need knowing what he actually omitted. Maya felt her stomach plummet. How many recordings exist? Victor's expression turned grim. 9 years worth. That's impossible. We can't review 9 years in 48 hours. We don't need reviewing everything. Just the crucial ones. Agreements that collapsed, partnerships that deteriorated, negotiations where I sensed something wrong but couldn't verify. His hands moved with intensifying energy. Daniel knew which mattered. He would have exercised maximum caution with those. Sophie accessed a file on a laptop, fingers flying across keys. She spoke English this time, accent precise. I've flagged highest priority recordings based on Mr. Chen's parameters. Meetings where substantial money transferred, where relationships soured unexpectedly, where outcomes didn't match supposed discussions. She rotated the screen toward Maya. 26 files, each labeled with dates and brief descriptions. That remains substantial, Maya said quietly. Then we'd better commence immediately, Victor signed. Sophie will play them. You communicate what you hear. Every word, every inflection, everything Daniel chose not translating. They initiated with a recording from 5 years prior, a negotiation with a shipping corporation regarding territorial rights. Maya donned headphones while Sophie started playback. Initially overwhelming. Multiple voices overlapping, technical terminology she didn't comprehend, names she couldn't track. But then she discovered her rhythm, signing while listening, converting words into movement Victor could decipher. The shipping CEO was communicating to Victor through Daniel that the proposed route expansion would cost additional $3 million, but would triple their capacity. That portion was accurate, but what Daniel hadn't translated was the sidebar conversation between the CEO and his deputy, barely audible, yet clear enough. Once he agrees to the route, we'll cite compliance issues and quadruple the cost. He can't withdraw once contracts are signed. Maya's hands faltered. She signed what she'd heard, and Victor's expression achieved absolute stillness. Then his hands moved sharp and controlled. What did Daniel communicate to me about that meeting afterward? Sophie accessed a file. Daniel's written summary. According to his notes, the meeting had proceeded smoothly. The CEO was enthusiastic and reliable. The deal was recommended for immediate approval. I lost $5 million on that expansion, Victor signed. The compliance issues materialized exactly as they promised each other. And Daniel told me it was unfortunate timing. They progressed to the next recording, then the next. Each revealed identical patterns. Daniel translating what people wanted, Victor believing while omitting truth spoken in margins. Promises made with crossed fingers. Threats delivered in whispers. Plans detailed carefully while Victor sat deaf and trusting in identical rooms. For hours in, Maya's hands were cramping and her mind felt like static. But Victor displayed no fatigue signs. He absorbed every revelation with identical controlled fury, his expression a mask occasionally cracking to reveal rage beneath. The 21st recording was from 8 months prior. A meeting with Petrov and Zhao. Identical men from tonight's attempted signing. Maya listened and her blood froze. Petrov's voice speaking Russian then translated to English by someone off camera. The merger is the perfect trap. Chun thinks he's expanding his empire, but the moment he signs, we own him. The clause on page 53 transfers all legal liability to him retroactively. Every questionable transaction we've made in the last decade becomes his responsibility. Zhao's voice cool and calculated. And Daniel has convinced him the clause is standard protective language. He'll never examine closely enough to understand what he's really signing. Petrov again. Even if he does, by then it will be too late. The federal prosecutors already have their case built. They're just waiting for him to put his name on the document. Then Chun goes away for 25 years minimum, and we split his territory 3 ways. Daniel's voice, barely audible. What about the server? The new one? She keeps observing the meetings. Fire her, Petrov said dismissively. Or have her handled. Whatever's easier. Maya's hands shook as she signed the translation. Victor's face had drained white beneath his controlled exterior. His jaw so tight she thought she heard something crack. Page 53 he signed to Sophie. Pull up the merger documents. Sophie's fingers flew across the keyboard. The document appeared on screen. Dense legal language that looked like every other contract Maya had ever seen. But Victor knew where to look. His finger traced down to a clause buried in the middle of a paragraph about asset management. He read it once, twice. Then his hand slammed down on the table hard enough to make the laptops jump. Sophie spoke quietly, reading the clause aloud in English. Upon execution of this agreement, the signatory assumes full legal and financial responsibility for all prior transactions conducted under the merged entity umbrella, including but not limited to transactions predating this agreement by a period not to exceed 10 years. That means everything they've concealed over the last decade becomes my responsibility the moment I sign, Victor finished. Everything transfers to me and they walk away untouched while I take the fall. Marcus had been standing silently by the window, but now he moved closer, his expression dark. He spoke in Korean, and Victor answered just as sharply. Maya didn't understand the words, but the body language was unmistakable. Anger, betrayal, and the kind of restraint that comes just before everything breaks. Finally, Victor turned back to her. His movements were slow, controlled, as if he were holding himself together by force alone. 9 years he signed. 9 years Daniel has been working against me, feeding me false information, guiding my decisions toward this trap, and I trusted him completely. What do we do? Maya asked. Her voice sounded small in the vast penthouse. We complete the review Victor signed. Every recording, every meeting. I need the full picture. Then, he stopped. He didn't need to finish. Whatever came next was already decided. They worked through the night. Maya translated recording after recording, her voice growing hoarse, her hands moving with a rhythm that now felt instinctive. With each revelation, the truth sharpened. Daniel hadn't made mistakes. He had been deliberately misrepresenting Victor's words, reshaping conversations to quietly undermine him. Partnerships that should have flourished mysteriously collapsed. Allies turned hostile over comments Victor never made. Entire projects were lost because his firm boundaries had been presented as hesitation. By 5 in the morning, Maya had translated 24 recordings. Her eyes burned, her throat ached, but Victor looked different now. Awake, focused, dangerous in a calm, precise way. 2 more he signed. Then we know everything. The 25th recording was from 3 years earlier. Another negotiation, more distortions, nothing new. But the 26th? The 26th was dated 4 years ago. A meeting Victor hadn't personally attended. Daniel's voice, confident and smooth. Mr. Chen sends his apologies. He's handling a sensitive situation elsewhere. I've been authorized to speak on his behalf. Another voice replied, cautious. And the unresolved issue from the West Side project? Handled, Daniel said. The incident was contained. No exposure, no complications. Maya's hands froze mid-sign. Slowly, she looked up at Victor, because that incident had changed everything. And Victor had never known Daniel was the one who decided how it ended. Daniel spent the next 7 hours chasing shadows. He'd driven to Maya's apartment, a cramped studio in a building that had seen better decades, only to find it exactly as his contact had described. Empty. Not just empty as in she wasn't home, but empty in a way that suggested she'd left in a hurry. A half-drunk cup of tea on the counter, still lukewarm. Her work shoes by the door, the ones she'd changed into before her shifts. Her keys hanging on the hook by the entrance. She'd left with someone, or been taken by someone. And Daniel had a sinking feeling he knew which scenario was true. He'd checked the establishment next, questioning staff members who gave him nervous, evasive answers. Yes, Maya had left early. No, they didn't know where she went. No, she hadn't seemed upset, just distracted, focused on something. One of the bartenders, after some persuasion and a generous tip, had mentioned seeing a black SUV idling near the service exit around the time Maya would have left. Expensive vehicle, tinted windows, the kind of car that screamed money and power. The kind of car Victor Chen's people drove. Daniel sat in his own car outside the establishment as dawn broke over the city, his hands gripping the steering wheel hard enough to make his knuckles ache. 9 years of careful planning, of meticulously constructed deception, and it was all unraveling because of one server who happened to know sign language. The odds of that were astronomical. What were the chances that in a city of millions, the one person who could expose his lies would be working in the exact room where the final trap was being set? Unless it wasn't chance at all. Daniel pulled out his phone and scrolled through old files, cross-referencing dates and locations. Maya had started working at the establishment 20 months ago, right around the time Petrov and Zhao had begun finalizing the merger documents, right when the conspiracy was entering its critical phase. Had she been planted there? Was she working for someone? Or was this truly just the universe's way of ensuring that lies, no matter how carefully told, eventually found their way to the light? His phone buzzed. A text from Zhao. Status update now. Daniel stared at the message, then typed back. She's with Chun. Confirmed sighting of his security team. Working on location. The response was immediate. Find her. Contain this. We're too exposed. Another text, this time from Petrov. The gala is in 12 hours. If Chun has proof, he'll use it there in front of everyone. You need to fix this before then. Daniel closed his eyes and leaned his head back against the seat. Fix this. As if it were that simple. As if he could just wave a hand and make a deaf man forget that he'd been betrayed by the one person he trusted to be his connection to the world. He thought about the penthouse, Victor's fortress, virtually impenetrable with security that rivaled government installations. He thought about Marcus, Victor's head of security, who had 20 years of military experience and loyalty that ran bone deep. He thought about the server Maya, who by now had probably told Victor everything she'd seen and heard. And he thought about himself, an interpreter who'd sold his integrity for money, who'd spent 9 years lying to a man who'd done nothing but trust him, who'd convinced himself it was just business until it became something far more personal. The weight of it settled on his chest like concrete. His phone rang. Not a text this time, but an actual call. A known number. Daniel answered, his voice cautious. Hello? Mr. Daniel. The voice was female, young, efficient. This is Sophie, Mr. Chen's digital security specialist. Mr. Chen would like to speak with you. Daniel's blood ran cold. I don't think that's... It's not a request, Sophie interrupted smoothly. Mr. Chen knows everything. He has recordings, documents, evidence of your involvement with Petrov and Zhao. He's willing to offer you a choice before tonight's gala. What kind of choice? Come to the penthouse. Alone, unarmed. Have a conversation. Or don't come and face the consequences when everything is revealed publicly in front of the entire underworld. Daniel's mind raced. This could be a trap. Victor could have him arrested the moment he walked through the door. Or worse, dealt with in ways that didn't involve police or courts. But if he didn't go, if he let Victor expose everything at the gala without even attempting to explain or negotiate, then he was finished anyway. Petrov and Zhao would blame him for the failure. The authorities would be waiting with handcuffs. His reputation would be destroyed. And his life, everything he'd built on lies and compromises, would collapse in a single evening. I'll come, Daniel said quietly. When? 3 hours. Come to the main entrance. Security will be expecting you. The call ended. Daniel sat in his car, watching the sun climb higher in the sky, and wondered if he was driving toward a confrontation or an execution. Either way, he supposed he'd earned it. He started the engine and headed toward the part of the city where men like Victor Chen lived in towers that touched the clouds, far above the consequences that trapped ordinary people. Maya was reviewing documents with Sophie when Marcus entered the room, his expression unreadable but alert. He spoke quickly in Korean, and Victor's head snapped up from the laptop he'd been studying. His hands moved sharply. Daniel is coming here. He'll be here in less than 3 hours. Maya felt her stomach drop. He's coming here? Why would he do that? Because Sophie called him. Victor signed, a hint of satisfaction in his expression. Offered him a choice. Come talk or face public exposure tonight with no warning. And he chose to come talk, Maya said, which means he's either very brave or very desperate. Probably both, Victor stood, his movements controlled but radiating tension. Marcus will handle security. Extra personnel, surveillance on every approach. If Daniel tries anything, we'll know before he's within 100 feet of this building. What are you going to say to him? Maya asked. Victor's hands paused mid-sign. He looked at her, really looked at her, and she saw something complicated in his eyes. Anger, yes, but also something that looked like grief. I'm going to ask him why, Victor signed slowly. 9 years. I treated him like family, paid him more than he could make anywhere else, trusted him with my life, with my business, with my reputation, and he betrayed all of it for money. I need to understand why. Some people don't need a reason beyond profit, Maya said quietly. Maybe. But I need to hear him say it. I need to look him in the eye, or watch his hands, and understand how someone could do what he did. Marcus spoke again, gesturing toward the windows. Victor nodded and signed something back. Then he turned to Maya. I want you in the secure room during the meeting. Behind one-way glass. You can see and hear everything, but Daniel won't know you're there. I should be in the room, Maya protested. I'm part of this now. Which is exactly why you need to be protected, Victor signed firmly. Daniel is desperate. Desperate people make unpredictable choices. I won't risk you getting caught in whatever he decides to do. Before Maya could argue further, Sophie's computer chimed. She glanced at the screen, her expression shifting to something more alert. She spoke in English. We have a problem. Surveillance picked up 4 vehicles moving toward this location. Not Daniel's car. Larger vehicles, commercial vans. Marcus moved immediately to the monitors. His hand already reaching for the weapon Maya knew he kept concealed. He spoke rapidly in Korean, pointing at different screens. Victor's face hardened. His hands moved in sharp, decisive signs. Petrov and Zhao. They're not waiting for Daniel. They're coming themselves. What do we do? Maya felt her pulse quicken. We lock down now. Victor was already moving, signing instructions to Marcus, who was speaking into his phone in rapid-fire Korean. Within seconds, the penthouse transformed. Steel shutters began descending over windows. Doors locked with heavy metallic clicks. The entire space became a fortress. Sophie's fingers flew across her keyboard. I'm alerting the building's security. Federal contacts are on standby. If they try to breach, we'll have law enforcement here in minutes. Will minutes be enough? Maya asked, her voice smaller than she intended. Victor moved to her side, his presence solid and reassuring despite the chaos. His hands were steady as he signed. Marcus has trained for this. This penthouse has more security features than most government buildings. And I've survived worse than desperate businessmen trying to silence me before I can expose them. But, trust me, Victor signed, and the certainty in his movements was absolute. You warned me once. You saved my life with your honesty. Now let me protect yours. Marcus appeared with 3 other security personnel Maya hadn't seen before, all moving with the same efficient, alert energy that marked them as professionals. They took positions by the entrance, weapons drawn but held low, ready but not aggressive. Sophie spoke without looking away from her screens. Vehicles have stopped at the building entrance. 8 individuals exiting. Building security is confronting them now. They watched on the monitors as Petrov, Zhao, and 6 men in dark suits argued with the building's security team. One of Petrov's men pulled out what looked like legal documents, waving them aggressively. The building's security chief shook his head, pointing firmly toward the exit. They're claiming they have a legal right to access, Sophie translated, listening to the audio feed through her earpiece. Some kind of business warrant. Building security isn't buying it. Then Daniel's car pulled up. Maya watched on screen as Daniel emerged, taking in the scene. Petrov's aggressive posturing, Zhao's cold calculation, the security standoff. Even from the camera angle, she could see the moment Daniel realized he'd walked into something much bigger than a private conversation. Petrov grabbed Daniel's arm, pulling him into their group. Daniel tried to pull away, shaking his head, his mouth moving in what looked like protests. But Zhao moved to his other side, and suddenly Daniel was trapped between them, being marched toward the building entrance whether he wanted to go or not. They're using him as leverage, Sophie said, claiming Daniel has a scheduled appointment with Mr. Chin, so they should be allowed to accompany him as his associates. Victor's expression was ice. His hands moved in signs so sharp they could have cut. They're escalating. They know they're out of time, so they're forcing a confrontation. What happens when they get up here? Maya asked. They won't get up here, Victor signed. Building security won't allow it without proper authorization, which they don't have. And if they try to force their way past, they'll be arrested for trespassing and attempted assault. They've already lost. They just don't know it yet. But even as he signed it, Maya saw something flicker across his face, a calculation, a risk assessment, the recognition that cornered predators were the most dangerous kind. On screen, Petrov was getting more aggressive. One of his men shoved past a security guard, trying to force his way toward the elevators. The security team responded immediately, physically blocking the path. More security personnel arrived, and suddenly Petrov's group was outnumbered 4-1. Police sirens wailed in the distance, growing closer. Sophie called them, Marcus said in English, the first words Maya had heard him speak directly to her. 7 minutes ago, when the vehicles arrived. Victor nodded his approval, his expression grim but satisfied. They watched as police officers flooded into the lobby. Watched as Petrov's aggression transformed into smooth corporate diplomacy. All smiles and reasonable explanations. Watched as Zhao produced business cards and made calm, rational arguments about misunderstandings and overzealous security. And they watched as Daniel stood slightly apart from the group, his face pale, his expression that of a man who just realized he'd been playing a game where the rules were far more dangerous than he'd understood. One of the police officers was talking into his radio. Another was examining the documents Petrov had presented. A third was speaking with building security, taking notes. Sophie's phone rang. She answered, listened, then spoke to Victor in Korean. He nodded, something like dark satisfaction crossing his face. His hands moved for Maya's benefit. The police are escorting them off the property. Petrov tried to claim legitimate business interests, but the building management confirmed they have no authorized access. They're being warned that any return attempt will result in immediate arrest for trespassing. So it's over? Maya asked. For now, Victor signed. But they'll regroup. Try something else. Which is why tonight's gala is so important. Once everything is public, once the evidence is in the hands of prosecutors and the underworld knows what they tried to do, they'll have nothing left to fight with. On screen, Petrov, Zhao, and their associates were being ushered toward their vehicles. Daniel stood on the sidewalk, looking up at the building. Looking up, Maya realized, toward the penthouse he'd never reach. Even from the camera angle, even through the distance and the grainy footage, she could see the defeat in his posture. The recognition that 9 years of lies had just collapsed in a single morning. Victor watched him for a long moment, then turned away from the monitors. His hands moved slowly. He made his choice. Now he lives with it. Do you feel better? Maya asked. Now that he knows you know? Victor considered the question. His hands moved thoughtfully. Not better. But I feel clearer. The lies are exposed. The truth is visible. And tonight everyone else will see it too. Marcus was already on his phone, coordinating increased security for the gala. Sophie was compiling the final evidence packages, ensuring every recording, every document, every piece of proof was organized and ready for presentation. And Maya stood in the middle of Victor Chen's fortress, watching the morning light stream through bulletproof windows, and realized that sometimes justice wasn't about revenge or retribution. Sometimes it was just about making sure the truth was heard, in whatever language necessary. This story is reaching its powerful conclusion. Subscribe to see how truth wins over deception. Comment below with your country. Let's see how far this message of justice has traveled. The gala was everything Maya had expected and nothing she was prepared for. The venue was a restored ballroom from the 1920s, all Art Deco elegance and modern security systems. Chandeliers dripped crystal light over men and women who represented the city's most powerful business networks, dressed in designer clothes and wearing smiles that didn't quite reach their eyes. Maya wore a dress Sophie had acquired from somewhere, midnight blue silk that fit like it had been made for her, which it probably had been in the 7 hours since Victor had decided she needed appropriate presents for this particular evening. Her hair was styled, her makeup was flawless, and she looked nothing like the terrified server who'd dropped a spoon 4 days ago. She looked like someone who belonged here, someone with purpose. Victor stood beside her, commanding in a tailored tuxedo that probably cost more than her annual rent. His expression was relaxed, almost pleasant, giving no indication that he was about to detonate a revelation in the middle of his own event. Daniel was across the room, playing his role with visible strain, the dutiful interpreter, the loyal assistant. He signed something to a group of businessmen, translated their responses, but his movements lacked their usual confidence. His eyes kept scanning the crowd, and when they landed on Maya standing beside Victor, she saw him go pale. He knew she was the catalyst for everything that was about to unfold. Petrov and Zhao held court near the bar, surrounded by associates and allies. They looked confident, satisfied, like men who believed they'd already won. That this evening was merely a formality before they claimed their prize. Marcus appeared at Victor's elbow, signed something brief, and melted back into the crowd. The signal. Everything was in place. Victor's hand found Maya's, squeezed once, then let go. His hands moved. "Are you ready?" She signed back. "I've been ready since the moment I picked up that spoon." He nodded, something like pride flickering across his face, then moved toward the stage at the front of the ballroom. Conversations quieted as people noticed. This wasn't on the program. The merger signing was supposed to happen later, during dinner. But Victor Chen commanded attention simply by existing, and when he stepped onto the stage, the entire room focused on him. Daniel's face went white. He started moving toward the stage, signing frantically, trying to get Victor's attention. But Marcus intercepted him smoothly, gripping his arm with enough firmness to make Daniel stop mid-step. Victor stood center stage and began to sign. Not to Daniel, not to any interpreter. Directly to the room. His hands moving with the fluid confidence of someone who'd finally decided to speak his truth in his own language. Screens flickered to life around the ballroom. Sophie's work. Subtitles began appearing, translating Victor's signs for those who didn't understand ASL. 9 years ago, I hired an interpreter I thought I could trust. Someone who would be my voice, my connection to a world built for people who can hear. I gave him access to every part of my life. My business. My decisions. I thought I was building an empire. Instead, I was being led into a trap. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Petrov and Zhao were frozen, their expressions shifting from confusion to dawning horror. For 9 years, Daniel filtered every conversation, every negotiation, every deal. He told me what he wanted me to know and hid everything else. He steered me toward agreements that benefited others while damaging my interests. He translated my words incorrectly to create conflicts where none existed. And tonight, I'm going to show you exactly what he did. The screens changed. Audio began playing the recordings Maya had translated. Daniel's voice, clear and damning, orchestrating deals that betrayed Victor at every turn. Petrov and Zhao's voices, planning the merger trap with clinical precision. "The merger is perfect," Petrov's voice echoed through the ballroom. "Chen signs the documents, assumes all our legal liabilities, and we walk away clean with his territory divided between us." Zhao's voice, And Daniel has convinced him the liability clause is standard protective language. He'll never understand what he's really signing until it's too late. Daniel's voice. He trusts me completely. He doesn't question my translations anymore. He's completely dependent. The room erupted in whispers. Heads turned toward Daniel, toward Petrov and Zhao, toward Victor, standing calmly on stage. Maya stepped forward, joining Victor under the lights. Every eye in the room turned to her, and she felt the weight of their attention like a physical force. But she didn't falter. She signed as she spoke, her voice carrying across the silent ballroom. I'm a server at the underground establishment where these meetings took place. I know American Sign Language because I learned it to communicate with my younger sister. 4 days ago, I was serving during what was supposed to be Mr. Chen's final merger meeting. I watched the business partners use verbal cues that completely contradicted what the interpreter was signing to Mr. Chen. She paused, letting her words sink in. I saw Mr. Chen about to sign documents that would destroy everything he'd built. So I used sign language to warn him. I told him the truth that his interpreter had been hiding for 9 years. That the people he was negotiating with were planning to betray him. That the merger documents were designed to transfer all their legal problems onto him while they walked away with his assets. The screens showed the merger documents now, with the liability clause highlighted in red. Legal experts in the audience leaned forward, reading, and Maya watched understanding dawn on their faces. Victor's hands moved again. I've compiled everything. Every recording where Daniel mistranslated or omitted critical information. Every document where he advised me incorrectly. Every deal where he steered me toward failure, while pretending to protect my interests. It's all been delivered to the appropriate authorities, along with the evidence of the conspiracy between Daniel, Petrov, and Zhao. He paused, his expression hardening. I was told that being deaf made me vulnerable. That I needed others to navigate a world I couldn't fully hear. But the only thing that made me vulnerable was trusting the wrong person, to be honest. My disability wasn't the weakness. The betrayal was. Petrov lunged toward the exit. Zhao was right behind him, but security personnel, not Marcus's team but official law enforcement that Sophie had coordinated with, blocked every door. Federal agents in plain clothes stepped forward, badges visible. And suddenly the elegant gala transformed into something else entirely. Mr. Petrov, Mr. Zhao, one of the agents said clearly, his voice carrying through the ballroom. We have warrants for your arrest on charges of conspiracy, fraud, and attempted theft by deception. You have the right to remain silent. The room watched in stunned silence as handcuffs clicked into place. Watched as the men who'd tried to steal an empire were led away like common criminals. Daniel stood frozen near the stage, Marcus still holding his arm. An agent approached him as well, and Daniel didn't resist. He looked up at Victor one last time, his face a portrait of regret and defeat. He signed slowly, shakily. I'm sorry. Victor looked down at the man who'd betrayed him for 9 years. His response was delivered in signs so precise they left no room for misinterpretation. Sorry isn't a language I speak anymore. Not from you. Daniel was led away, his shoulders slumped, his career and reputation crumbling with each step. The ballroom remained silent for a long moment. Then someone started clapping. Then another. Then the entire room erupted in applause. Not for the drama, but for the truth. For the man who'd stood on stage and refused to be defined by what he couldn't hear. Victor stood tall and unshakable. A man who'd been trapped in deception for 9 years and had just announced to everyone that mattered that he didn't need anyone to speak for him anymore. He just needed to be heard. For months later, the penthouse was quiet again. But it was a different kind of quiet than before. Less isolating. More peaceful. Victor sat at the dining table, his hands moving through the alphabet with careful precision while Maya watched, correcting his finger placement when needed. Better, she signed. Your S was a little loose, but much better than last week. He'd been learning ASL properly. Not the corporate signing Daniel had taught him, but the rich, expressive language Maya had learned from her sister. Learning to communicate without a filter. Without someone standing between him and the world. I should have done this years ago, he said aloud, his voice slightly accented from disuse but clear. He'd been practicing that too, speaking more, learning to trust his own voice even when he couldn't hear it. You're doing it now, Maya signed. That's what matters. The legal proceedings had moved swiftly. Daniel was facing multiple charges related to fraud and conspiracy. Petrov and Zhao were looking at significant prison sentences. The evidence Victor and Sophie had compiled was airtight. Years of recordings, documents, financial transactions that painted a clear picture of betrayal and attempted theft. Victor himself had emerged not just clean, but respected. The business community had watched him expose the conspiracy with grace and precision, and his reputation had transformed from the deaf boss who needed help to the strategic leader who'd been playing chess while everyone else played checkers. He was rebuilding now. Smaller, more careful, more selective about who he trusted. And Maya was helping him. Not as a server, not as a temporary interpreter, but as someone who understood both the language he spoke and the challenges he faced. I have something to show you, Victor said, signing it as he spoke. He pulled out a folder, sliding it across the table. Maya opened it and felt her breath catch. Architectural drawings. Floor plans. A budget spreadsheet. What is this? A community center, Victor signed. For deaf children and their families. Education, resources, ASL classes, community support. The things I didn't have growing up. The things families need when they're navigating a world that isn't built for them. He paused, his hands moving more slowly, more carefully. I want you to help me run it. Not just as a consultant, but as a partner. You understand what these families need. You understand the language, the culture, the challenges. You understand what it means to love someone in a world that isn't built for them. Maya felt tears prick at her eyes. She looked at the drawings, the open classrooms, the resource library, the community gathering spaces. She saw her sister's face in every corner, every possibility. Yes, she said, signing it with hands that had learned to speak a language of love, had warned a stranger of danger, and had helped bring truth to light. Yes, I'll do it. For every family that needs it. For every child who deserves to be heard. Victor's smile was rare but genuine. They shook hands, a promise made in silence, sealed in trust. Outside, the city moved on, unaware of the quiet revolution happening in a penthouse where a deaf businessman and a former server had discovered that the most powerful language wasn't the one you spoke or heard. It was the one you chose to understand. The one you chose to trust. The one that built bridges instead of walls. 7 months later, the Chun Community Center opened its doors in a renovated building downtown. The name had been Maya's suggestion, honoring Victor's courage while creating something that would outlast them both. Deaf children and their families filled the bright, open spaces, learning sign language, connecting with resources, finding community. On the wall of the main hall hung a mission statement in both English and ASL. Everyone deserves to be heard. Everyone deserves to be understood. Everyone deserves truth. Maya stood in that hall during the opening ceremony, watching families communicate in the language her sister had loved so much, and felt her presence like a warm hand on her shoulder. This was for her. For all the children who deserved to grow up knowing that their way of communicating wasn't a limitation, but a different kind of strength. Victor stood beside her, his hands moving in fluid ASL as he welcomed the families. No interpreter needed. He'd kept his promise. He'd learned the language properly, made it his own, refused to ever again let someone else control his voice. And when he looked at Maya, his signs were simple but weighted with everything they'd survived together. Thank you for warning me. For trusting me. For showing me that truth is louder than any lie. She signed back. Thank you for listening. A young girl approached them, maybe 6 years old, with bright eyes and quick hands. She signed to Victor. Are you really deaf like me? Victor knelt down to her level, bringing himself to her world. Yes, he signed. Just like you. My mom says you're really important. That you run companies and stuff. I do, Victor signed. But being deaf doesn't stop me. It just means I communicate differently. Just like you. The little girl's face lit up. So I can be important too? You already are, Victor signed, and Maya watched his hands move with a gentleness she'd never seen before. You just have to make sure the people around you are honest. That they tell you the truth. And that you trust yourself to know the difference. The girl nodded solemnly, then ran back to her parents, signing excitedly about what the important man had told her. Maya felt tears on her cheeks. Good tears. Healing tears. Victor stood, and together they watched the community center fill with life, with conversation, with connection, with the sound of silence speaking volumes. We did something good here, Maya said, signing it as she spoke. We did something necessary, Victor corrected gently. We created a place where honesty is the only language that matters. Where people don't have to worry about translations being filtered through someone else's agenda. Where truth is accessible to everyone. Your empire is different now, Maya observed. Better, Victor signed. Smaller maybe. Less dramatic. But built on something real. Built on trust that's been earned, not assumed. Built on understanding rather than deception. They stood together in comfortable silence. Two people who'd met in a moment of desperate truth. And had built something beautiful from the ashes of betrayal. In a world built on noise and deception, they'd found truth in silence. And in that truth, they'd built something that would outlast them both. A legacy not of empires or wealth, but of understanding, of connection, of a language that spoke directly to the heart. 1 year after the gala, Maya stood in the community center's library, surrounded by children practicing their signs. A news crew was there, filming a segment about the center's success, about the businessman who'd transformed his own betrayal into an opportunity to serve others. The reporter, speaking through an ASL interpreter, asked Victor, "What would you say to others who feel limited by their disabilities?" Victor's hands moved with the confidence of someone who'd found his voice. "I would say that limitations are often just lies we've been told about ourselves. The only real limitation is trusting people who don't have your best interests at heart. Find honest people. Build honest relationships. And never let someone else tell your story for you." The reporter smiled. "And what about you, Miss Chen? You went from server to director of one of the city's most successful community programs. What changed?" Maya thought about that moment in the boardroom, about the spoon falling, about the choice to speak truth to power, even when it terrified her. "I learned that sometimes the smallest actions have the biggest consequences," she said, signing as she spoke. "I learned that honesty is worth the risk. And I learned that the people who seem most powerful are sometimes the ones most trapped by deception. Setting them free sets everyone free." The reporter nodded, satisfied, and moved on to film more of the center's activities. Victor touched Maya's shoulder, his hands moving. "That was well said. I learned from the best," Maya signed back. "You taught me just as much," Victor responded. "Maybe more. You showed me that vulnerability isn't weakness. That asking for help from the right people is strength. That trust is built on truth, not convenience." They watched the children playing, learning, growing in an environment built on honesty and understanding. And Maya knew that somewhere, her sister was watching too. Proud of what her gift of language had helped create. In the end, it wasn't about revenge or victory or proving anyone wrong. It was about making sure that silence, whether chosen or imposed, could never again be used as a weapon. It was about ensuring that everyone, regardless of how they communicated, had access to truth. It was about building a world where honesty didn't require translation. And in that world, Victor Chun and Maya Williams had found something neither of them expected. Not justice, but peace. Not just vindication, but purpose. Not just survival, but a reason to keep building something better. The end. If this story touched your heart, subscribe for more tales of courage, truth, and unexpected heroes. Drop a comment telling us where you're watching from. Let's see how far this message of honesty and resilience has traveled. From one corner of the world to another, we're all connected by the stories that remind us to be brave.